once I started executing on that plan, it took me 9 months to go full time. Now, I'll say two things about that. First of all, I don't think 9 months is realistic. If you're new today and you're listening to this going, well, I can be full time in 9 months. No, you can't. I was incredibly lucky. And I also will tell you, the second thing is I jumped too soon. I really should have kept it as a side hustle for another year. I think 2 years would have been just about right. And the reason I say that is one of the ways that I jumped to full time was I booked an insane amount of work in a very small period of time. I booked over 40 grand worth of work in 11 days.
Disinformation is spreading.
There will be a surprise outbreak. Is the issue of pandemic.
No social distancing at all.
They said that they would express their concerns about the mask supply.
Where's the mask? Where's the glove?
A second wave is
we all need some good news.
A message for all the healthcare workers out there.
Thank you.
If you're looking for hope tonight, raise your hand. If you feel alone and don't understand, if you're fighting the fight of your life, then stand.
From Santa Rosa, California, this is 19 Stories. I'm Cheryl Halling. The first thing my guest, Paul Schmidt, would like you to know about him is that as a single dad, his teenage son, Robbie, is his world and his reason for everything, which is incredibly endearing considering the level of success he's attained in a variety of professional and creative endeavors. Perhaps his success is due to being cast at the age of 6 in the role of God in his school play, and that has anointed his efforts ever since. For years, Paul would continue his thespian pursuits, acting in just about anything he could, which in 1980s Baltimore meant musicals, as he performed in over 20 of them before he turned 18. Once he was out of college, he pursued a successful career in broadcasting and started on air at 98 Rock in Baltimore and eventually went on air full-time at WRDX in Wilmington, Delaware for almost a decade. Adding to his performance repertoire, Paul did stand-up comedy and owned and operated Christina's Comedy Zone at Dover Downs Hotel and Casino for 3 years, which won Best Comedy Club in Delaware Today magazine. He also did a year of improv in the Baltimore troupe of Comedy Sports. For the past 25 years, Paul has poured his stage and on-camera acting experience into commercial and corporate voiceover work and voicing for hundreds of small and medium-sized businesses via explainer videos, e-learning, corporate training, medical narration, and audiobooks. As a community builder and business coach, Paul created the VO Freedom Master Plan, a voiceover marketing program designed to generate consistent opportunities for voice actors to book work, and the VO Pro community, a private, professional, global community created to meet the needs of voice actors and audiobook narrators who want to take their careers to the next level. Joining me from Richmond, Virginia, Paul is an avid sports fan who loves playing golf with his son and refers to himself, among other things, as a golf suckist. To talk about all this and more, I'd like to welcome Paul Schmidt to 19 Stories.
Wow. Wow. I think that's my whole life right there, Cheryl. Thank you.
Paul, thank you for joining me today. And how are you doing?
You know what? I couldn't be any better. And you're very kind to give me that very kind intro. I would say, good God, a solid 90% of that is highly accurate. But the part that you really nailed, is my son is my whole world. And he has been for the last almost 18 years. And to be honest, he's getting ready to start, well, in the fall, he'll start his senior year of high school. And that's the last year we're really going to have together. And, you know, that's the goal, right, is to launch a successful, happy, well-adjusted kid.
And yet at the same time,
Cheryl,
I think it's apropos. I really think it's only apropos that given how much you love and revere your son and what you just expressed to, you know, give a shout out to Robbie as you just did. And I would love it if you would tell us a bit more about him and perhaps how being a single dad has influenced your career choices in any way or how you approach your professional and creative endeavors.
Well, I got to be honest. I think a lot of people, and maybe rightfully so, say this about their kids. But my kid, he feels like he's a unicorn, right? Because the amount of parenting I have had to do over the course of almost 18 years has been like minimal, right? He is such a smart, kind, well-behaved, generous person, and he always has been. And so he like it's almost like not being a parent, right? Because he's such a great kid. That said, I bristle a little bit, even though it's technically true, at the term single dad, because my son is lucky enough to have 3 great parents.
Okay.
Me, his mom, and his stepdad. And, it's been that way since he was 4 or 5 years old. And so in raising that child, I've had a ton of help. I hopefully have been a little help. So yes, single dad as far as our household goes, sure, absolutely. And yes, that has sort of influenced certainly my voiceover career, especially when I was first going full time, because, in a one income house, if you change careers, this has to work, right? There's not really a plan B at that point, right? So that fear and that anxiety and the stakes were high, right? I mean, like this voiceover thing had to work because that was going to be the mechanism by which I was going to keep up my end of the bargain to take care of my son. And fortunately, that abject fear.
Yeah, I think it's worked. And I really appreciate you speaking to that, Paul, because sometimes there is another component, and it's the little village, if you will, that does raise the child.
Yeah.
And sometimes there isn't. I mean, yes, there may be a
Right.
mom or a dad, but they are in absentia and they're not involved. And then even if they are involved, there's division amongst the exes. So
Yep.
thank you for not correcting, but speaking to the fact that he has a great support system, as do you. Thank you for that. And
Absolutely.
so, okay, before we go on, I need to know, what is a golf suckist? Please explain.
Well, where that started was, look, I am an avid golfer. I am not an accomplished golfer.
Okay.
And this started this was probably a decade ago, maybe. Before I went full time in voiceover, I was working on my LinkedIn profile one day, and I just thought, I kind of need a conversation starter. And I just, I put my name, my title, and then golf suckist, right? As in someone who sucks at golf. And I can't tell you how well it worked, because, I get people reaching out all the time that say, hey, golf suckist, me too, love that, and I even had hats made up for my son and I and a couple of close VO friends, and just put golf suckist on a golf cap. And we get compliments on it all the time. So I used to sell them through my website, but the printing company discontinued the hats, so I got to figure that part out. But that's where golf suckist came from.
I thought it was self-explanatory, but at the same time, I've never heard that term. So I thought, I don't know many of the things that people could refer to golf. And so it's the first time I saw that, and I thought, well, I'm going to ask him about
Well, we live in a world where no idea is original, but I will say I think I coined that phrase.
Probably so. It sounds like it.
I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I saw it somewhere, but I think I made it up.
And it worked. So, Paul, I once heard an acting coach say that you've got to get out there and live life beyond your pursuits so that you have something to bring to the mic, stage, camera, etc. And I believe you've done just that, as not only have you voiced for some really impressive clients and projects, and you're also a master salesman with some incredible stats behind your former business titles. And then you owned and operated Christina's Comedy Zone and performed stand-up comedy as well as improv with Comedy Sports.
Mm-hmm.
So how did your background in acting and broadcasting help you in the comedy world? And what did you learn from those experiences that helped you pivot from owning a comedy club to becoming a master sales and marketing guru?
Wow. How do I answer that? I think, well, first of all, I come from a funny family. When we get together, and this has always been the case from the time I was small, man, people were laughing. We buried my dad about 10, 12 years ago. And, you would think you would have memories of the grief and the sorrow and what have you. But first of all, my dad was 94, so he had a pretty good run. But what I remember from that week was us sitting in my cousin's kitchen in Baltimore, just in tears, making each other just cry laughing, telling stories and cutting up on each other. And that's our family, right? So I always grew up with that. And I always had an interest in comedy. Be honest with you, the reason I started a comedy club was to get more stage time.
That's okay. If it doesn't exist, create it, right?
So I was never an accomplished comedian, but I was decent. Like I could hold my own for 5 minutes and introduce the real comedians. And it was great fun. I think the pivot that I made was, my career started in broadcasting and then kind of diverged into technology. And it always felt like somebody else was driving the bus. Like I was taking the next job because I either was unhappy in the first job or because I got let go or whatever it might be. It was always reactive, right? So my career always felt meandering, right? And if you look at it, God, I was a radio DJ and I owned a comedy club and I sold for technology companies and ad agencies and whatever. And I remember standing in my living room about 7 years ago, something like that. And I went, wait a minute, hold on. Marketing background, on-air background. I've been a webmaster. I've sold websites and high-end technology. I've sold. That's good. Hold on a second. I might have, through no grand design of my own, 3 or 4 or 5 core skills that might make me a pretty good business person as a voice actor. Like it just seemed to all coalesce in that moment. And I went, holy mackerel, maybe I can make a run at this, because it was my biggest dream, right? I had tried in the late 90s to go into voice acting and hit the brick wall and slid all the way down. But the world had changed between then and 10 years ago. And we saw the rise of the non-union voice actor and all this, there's more work out there now than there ever has been. And when I realized the world had changed and I could go sell my services directly without having to rely on some agent in, wherever, I went, oh man, holy mackerel, I think I can do this. And that's what happened.
Can you speak to that for a moment? The comment about you, when you tried in the 90s, you hit a brick wall. Why? What happened for you then, or didn't happen for you then?
Yeah, so I was on air at the station you mentioned, WRDX in Wilmington, Delaware. Well, Wilmington is like market 75, right? And I caught the voice acting bug because I was producing commercials at the radio station, and I realized that the stuff that we were doing on a local level wasn't as good as the stuff we were getting in, even from the local agencies and from national. And that's when I realized the difference between voice acting and just the punchy radio read that we all did in those days. And like my heart set on fire. I was like, holy mackerel, because I had been an actor when I was a kid, like you mentioned. And now I get to combine acting and sort of, certainly on mic work. And like my soul just lit on fire. So I really tried to dig into the business. And I bought a book by a guy named Sandy Thomas, who is still around. And he's now both an accomplished voice actor of many decades and a coach. And that book that he wrote 30 years ago is called So You Want to Be a Voiceover Star. And my God, Cheryl, I ate this book like food. Like I just consumed it. And I wrote to Sandy. This was before the internet is what it is now. And he wrote me back, and we had a brief pen pal relationship, and he was super inspirational and supportive to me. And I did the whole thing. I bought the 5-minute cassettes from Broadcast Supply Warehouse, right? Put my 3-minute demo on there. And I would stay late surreptitiously at night at the radio station because they had a black and white laser printer, right? That I could use. The thing was like the size of a Volkswagen.
Yeah.
And I did the whole thing. I did the demos, and I mailed out hundreds of demos. And I even took an unpaid internship in Philadelphia, which is right up the road from Wilmington, at Mike Lemon Casting for like 6 months. So I, could learn the business from the inside out. And what I really learned through all of that experience was, at the time, if you weren't in New York or LA or maybe Chicago, and you didn't have access to coaching because there was no online coaching then, so you had to be in those markets. If you weren't union at the time, SAG and AFTRA were separate. If you weren't on camera, if you didn't have representation, then, if you didn't have all of those things, you didn't work.
Yeah.
And even in Philadelphia, the on-camera talent got all the work because all the voiceover work because they already had the relationships. So when I tell you, I went hard from Wilmington, Delaware, which was the biggest obstacle. I don't think I had the self-awareness at that point to be able to have the confidence to move to a New York or an LA and take that shot. So, given that context, that's what I did. I hit the wall and I slid all the way down.
I love that you spoke to that because this is an incredible time, and I think you've talked about this in different ways about, the low bar of entry that anybody in their, brother, mother, sister, cat, if you have a microphone, can get into voiceover. And yet the time that you spoke of, I remember the cassettes. In fact, one of my first demos was on a cassette. And by the way, they are coming back in fashion.
Are they?
Cassettes are very hot right now. I just watched a YouTube video on why that is. And I also do remember when I joined After First and then I joined SAG when they were separate unions. So I'm that old. I remember that time.
Yeah, I do too.
In addition to what we've chatted about so far, you are also a 4-time SOVIS nominated website designer, which, by the way, I just watched your website webinar on VO Pro, which is wonderful, very helpful. And you're a host and producer of the weekly podcast VO Pro, the business of voiceover and voice acting, and created the VO Master Plan and the VO Pro community. With all of your successes in both secular businesses, if you will, and with a thriving career in voiceover, what is the VO? Tell us, our listeners, what the VO Freedom Master Plan is and what motivated you to create it back in January of 2022.
Sure. So, when I told you I had that revelation, like, oh my God, if I could sell my own voiceover services, like I absolutely know I'd be my own best agent, right? And that's what I did. I spent 6 months building a plan for myself because I had a ton of sales training and I knew what it took. And I started to assemble tools and processes and messaging, upped my demo game, upped my website game, got everything in order. And it took me 6 months. And then once I started executing on that plan, it took me 9 months to go full time. Now, I'll say two things about that. First of all, I don't think 9 months is realistic. If you're new today and you're listening to this going, well, I can be full-time in 9 months. No, you can't. I was incredibly lucky. And I also will tell you, the second thing is I jumped too soon. I really should have kept it as a side hustle for another year. I think 2 years would have been just about right. And the reason I say that is one of the ways that I jumped to full-time was I booked an insane amount of work in a very small period of time. I booked over 40 grand worth of work in 11 days.
What?
Yeah.
What year was this?
Yeah, this would have been 2017 or 18. So I literally went, I can't get all this work done with a full-time job. And I thought I may never get this opportunity again, right? This was work that was going to last me months. And so I turned in my 2 weeks notice. My boss did me the favor of cutting that in half, let me go in a week. And that's what I did. 6 months in, we had a call with the biggest of that small group of clients that allowed me to go full time. And they said, Paul, we love you. We love your work. We love our relationship. We have 4 more lines of videos we want to do with you. They actually said this to me, Cheryl. The work is virtually endless. Well, the clouds parted, the angels sang.
I'd say so. I would say so.
Right.
Yes.
And then 2 weeks later, they called me and said, yeah, the CEO wants a younger sounding guy. Thanks so much. Like getting dropped off a
Welcome
cliff, right?
to the world of voiceover, folks. I mean, there's people out there listening to you that are going to listen to this episode going, see, it can be, oh, wow, that's amazing. Oh. Yeah. The reality. Welcome to reality. I hope you were saving your ducats at the time.
Well, I mean, everything I could, right? But the truth is not enough. And so I describe, told a lot of people this, I describe my early full-time career, Cheryl, as an Indiana Jones movie, right? Like I knew enough to jump in the biplane and get it rolling down the dirt road, but I lost a half a wing on a tree and I lost the landing gear on a barn and it was zigging and zagging there for a while. But I got it stabilized. I did what I had to do to not go back to a full-time corporate job. I drove Lyft for a while. I got a little help from family, and I got it stabilized. And by the third year, I was making more money in voiceover than I ever made in any job in my life. And I was well into the six figures by then. And so to bring it back to your original question is, what inspired me to create the VO Freedom Master Plan was I started to come to realize that the success that I had had early was not common. Like,
No.
you have no frame of reference at first. You just assume everybody's doing like you are. And I started to realize, no, that's not the case at all. And I started to see people leave the business. And in some cases, Cheryl, I knew in my heart they were way more talented than me. And I went, something's wrong here, right? So that kind of stuck with me. And what brought it to a head was I was 3 years ago, I was reading through the State of VO survey. It's now conducted by the voice actors in New York City. And there were 2 data points in there that just kind of smacked me between the eyes. Number one, 50% of us were making less than $8,000 a year. 75% of us were making less than 40 grand a year. That number is now 50 as of the latest survey. And then number 2, they asked voice actors, how often are you reaching out to market your services? And 75% of us said less than 3 times a day. And I went, you're kidding me, right? Because that's how I grew my business, right? Was reaching out to people and killing what I ate, or eating what I killed rather.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew there was a link between those 2 data points. We're not reaching out. We're not making any money because we're not reaching out. We're not marketing our services. And so I decided that, well, I need to kind of dig into why are we so passive, right? What's holding us back? And so I made the goal to talk to 50 voice actors that fall. And I ended up talking to 69 people in 75 days. And marketing was a big black box for most people. They didn't have any experience in it. They didn't understand it. There was a large contingent of our population that came from an artist background and felt it was sleazy and manipulative and, somehow, in a positive, beneath them in some way. There were a lot of mental roadblocks to why people weren't marketing. And I went, okay, this is what needs to be addressed, because I knew in my heart that marketing and sales is not what people perceive it to be. It's not Herb Tarlick in the plaid jacket and the white shoes, finger popping and trying to get you in this car today, right? That's not what sales is. Sales, when it's done well and correctly, is a problem-solving discipline. It's collaborative. And it is an act of service. You're collaborating with somebody to help them solve a problem that they can't solve for themselves. And if you can do that and approach it that way, you don't have to be salesy. You don't have to be sleazy. You don't have to be creepy and manipulative. You can be yourself, be authentic, and be helpful. And if somebody doesn't want to have that conversation or has no need, that's fine. You move on, right? It's not about convincing or conniving or anything else.
I'm going to say amen. I always say amen at least once during my podcast to just really affirm what someone has said. And I love the fact that you cared enough, not just to market yourself and take all your years of experience, but really kind of had that epiphany to go, how can I be of service and help other people? And I come from a time where, marketing was, because I did radio and record promotion for years and years, I picked up the phone. That's where I come from. And it's really weird that, and I'll speak to my discomfort for a moment, is sending out emails, because at a time where I had no problem calling anybody, I would even, when I was doing on-camera work, would drop off headshots directly to casting directors. And that was considered a no, you don't do that. You just, and I'm like, well, who says? Just because it's never been done, who says you don't do it?
Right.
And so now, it's leading into a question, actually. It seems like with this information you're giving people and the fact that you would put this curriculum together, that you would care so passionately about fellow actors, that you would do this, do you feel that directors, creative directors, et cetera, are being inundated with everybody self-marketing? Or do you find that people have this information, but they still don't do it?
They were inundated. They've always been inundated. I don't defer with that opinion at all. The problem is they're getting inundated with lazy marketing 99 times out of 100, right?
Explain. What does that mean?
So lazy marketing is essentially, hi, let me tell you all about me and ask you for work.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Good marketing is, hey, I noticed this about you. And if you're anything like the people I work with, you probably have this problem. If you do, great. Let's talk about how we might solve it. If you don't, that's fine too. Have a lovely day, right? In other words, you've got to know a little bit about, if not the person that you're sending to, you have to know what their role is like, what they do for a living, what their general pain points are. You've got to speak. It's got to be about them, right? It can't be about you. And so I think there's a lot of lazy, bad, inconsistent marketing out there. A lot of creative directors, casting directors, producers, production executives, they're getting inundated mostly by people who reach out once and never again. And they know that. They also know the people that bother to follow up, bother to build a relationship, bother to try and provide value with every communication. They know the difference. They understand the difference. And those are the people they end up working with.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for addressing that.
Thanks
And
for a great question.
You're welcome. In your most recent episode, this is totally going off topic for a moment, but I do have to ask you about this. One of your most recent podcast episodes on what the 4 hot voiceover genres are in 2024 and those that are not, you referred to audiobooks being hotter than habanero underwear. So I'm curious
I
if you've
did say that, didn't I?
Yes, you did. And I thought, have you ever had experience donning a pair of said undergarments?
No. That's
Okay.
one of those, I don't have to eat dirt to know I don't like it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so I've never actually worn habanero underwear, I have to confess.
Okay. Some of these regional or the colloquialisms that come up from where they've grown up or what they've listened to from their father or grandfather, et cetera. I just thought, I have never heard that one.
Yeah. Well, see, my
So-
mother was from the South. She was from West Virginia. She grew up in coal country. And
Okay.
so she had a million of them. She told me one time, Cheryl, I was about 10 years old, and she told me, boy, I'm going to beat your ass until it won't hold shucks. And I'm 57 years old right now, and I still do not know what shucks are or why they would be falling out of my butt. You know what I mean?
Actually, I had never heard that either. But if I'm not mistaken, shucks, no, I'm thinking of corn husk. Huh.
Yeah,
Now,
shucks is the verb. You shuck an ear of corn, right?
yeah, so
I've never heard it as a
maybe,
noun.
yeah, maybe it's referring to that was what was available as toilet paper
Maybe.
because a lot of folks were really poor. So
I just knew
okay.
I'd better start behaving. That was my cue.
Okay, there you go. That for any parents out there who are looking for a term to use in their disciplinary
It helps if you're
direction.
Southern, yeah.
Yeah. So in all seriousness, AI, because we're gonna pivot on this topic just for a hot moment. It's a topic that you give some attention to, and it's no secret to those who follow you and watch you on YouTube that behind you in your videos is your famous FU AI pillow. And in the aforementioned episode about the 4 hot topics, you mention how AI is becoming or beginning to take a cut out of audiobook production and how listeners are not responding well. And I've read similar statistics as it relates to audiobooks. However, I'm curious if you think that may be an age demographic specific, as a lot of younger people are being raised on Siri, Google Maps, navigation systems, etc., and are more accustomed to hearing that type of voice and may not be so resistant to hearing more of it in their entertainment. And of course, with Apple announcing their alliance with ChatGPT this week, I'm curious how you see that playing out with not only Apple and Microsoft. Now it's going to be in all, we already know it is. I mean, our phones listen to us. I'm convinced of that. But with it playing out in so many of the tools that we use, how you think it may or may not affect voiceover.
Synthetic voices are here, and they're here to stay. That's not going to change.
Yeah.
Where I think we, especially as voice actors, but also I think the culture right now at large are overreacting, is human voices are not going away. They're just not. It will, I think what's going to happen is this is going to be a tool that we will use. We will work alongside. It will take a significant amount of work. I think it will create a small amount of work. ironically, but we're going to end up working alongside voiceover. It's going to change the kinds of work that we do. And in large part, I believe it's going to take a lot of the crappy, awful work that we didn't enjoy in the first place, right, off the table, because a lot of the, at least right now, a lot of the work that's being done in AI is stuff where we weren't going to get paid a fair wage in the first place. It's work where, for example, encyclopedic content, that was, you can put an AI voice on that and produce it and be done with it. And that was work that a human voice actor was never going to get in the first place because it was always cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
So I think for content creators, I think a lot of it is going to be very useful. I think for the government, it's going to be very useful. It will change and it will probably shrink the amount of work out there. We will survive. Good actors will continue to work because what we do at the end of the day, this is especially true for some genres, not as true for other genres, but what we do is art. And I think that humans want art created by humans. We don't want art created by machines. I saw a quote this morning, and I'm going to butcher it, Cheryl, because I only saw it quickly, but somebody said, and I wish I could retain who it was, I want AI to handle my laundry and my dishes so that I can do my art. I don't want AI to produce my art so I can do my laundry and dishes, right?
Yes.
And I wish it's a brilliant quote, and it's absolutely true. I think that's true for most people. And I think large corporations, movie studios, etc., yeah, they're gonna push the boundaries as they have, and then the artists are gonna push back, as we did last summer with the SAG-AFTRA streaming contract. Right? Now, I'm not union myself, but the union sets the tone for what happens in the non-union world as well. And I think that was a big victory for artists. The Writers Guild contract was a big victory for artists.
Definitely, yes.
And the artists are going to fight back. We're not going to restore the world to what it was, but I think we'll find an amicable working compromise moving forward.
What do you think is the biggest challenge the VO industry is facing today?
As an industry, I think it might be AI. I also think that it's, in part, Cheryl, I think the enemy is us. I think that we get what we tolerate. And a good example of that outside of AI has been the large pay-to-plays, right? We have become so subservient and dependent upon them that we have relinquished a lot of our power as an industry and as individuals. And I think that if we're not vigilant in standing up for and getting grounded in our worth, that we face very serious peril. And the reason I bring that up is because that's the part of the game that we can control. We can control it as individuals and as an industry. Yes, there are outside forces, but the degree to which we stick to our guns and stand our ground is going to be the degree to which we are able to hold those outside forces at bay.
And that is the power of our voice as voice actors or voice talent, is to use our voice outside of the art so that our art can stay alive. And so I'm curious, there are people having very illustrious careers on their pay-to-plays because they came in at the point of entry when these P2Ps just started out. But is there something that everybody in voiceover should stop or start doing?
I would say in broad strokes, stop. If you are reliant upon, everybody thinks I'm anti-pay-to-play. I'm not. I think a pay-to-play can be a great tool, especially in certain circumstances, right? I think if you're one of those talent that got in 5 or 10 years ago into the pay-to-plays, have trained the algorithm, have developed the relationships, and that's successful for you, I congratulate you. God bless you. I think that new talent get confused and they look at that and they say, well, that worked 5 or 10 years ago. That'll work for me. And that's not the case, mainly because of the pandemic. We were flooded with undertrained and untrained talent who have now flooded the pay-to-plays with garbage performances and crappy audio, and that has dropped the expectations of clients. And so guess what? The rates have dropped too.
Mm-hmm.
J. Michael Collins said it a few months ago as well. The days of a new talent jumping on a pay-to-play or two and building a successful voiceover career are done. They're done. If you're already, and now it doesn't mean you can't use it as a tool. It doesn't mean you can't use it as a supplementary business development tactic, but you can't make a career on the pay-to-plays anymore unless you already have one on the pay-to-plays, right? So trying to rely on the pay-to-plays for your career is not only short-sighted, because any investment banker will tell you you need to diversify your portfolio. You need to diversify your income streams if you're a freelancer, like a voice actor, right? So the pay-to-plays can be, God, I hate this analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway, but one arrow in your quiver, right? And that should be used in conjunction with, in my estimation, direct marketing, because that is the best, most stable way to grow your business, because it's the only one of all your options where you own your relationships. And if you own the relationships directly, you have a little more control over those relationships. It doesn't mean that you can't get a call one day that says, by the way, the CEO wants a younger guy. Thank you for your time. It means that you're minimizing those chances because you're not working through a third party, and you're increasing your income because you're getting the entire budget rather than shoving 20% or 80% off to the platform. And look, social media is valid. If you have the time and the bandwidth and the energy and the know-how, social media is a great way to get work. I wouldn't rely on that either. Not even rely, like 90% of my income comes from work that I kill, right? That I go out and find. And that gives me the most control over my relationships and my destiny. And I prefer it that way.
To which I will give you my second amen.
I get an amen.
Can I get an amen? I'm curious who your mentors or industry role models are.
Wow. Mentors, I would say JMC has been there for me as, wise counsel. He's got a historic perspective on this business, and I think it's super valuable. There are Paul Strickverda is another one who has that great historic perspective. These guys have been in the business for decades full time, and I'm just coming up on my first decade. So, to have...
Congratulations. Woohoo.
Thanks. It's going to be a couple of years yet too. So I'm not even a decade in full time. I've been doing, I've been a voice actor for 25 years. I've been full time for 7, 8. So having people that you have, Kay Bess is another one, right? When I told you the wheels fell off of my airplane a few years ago after I had gone full time, I don't mind telling you, I was petrified, right? Because there was no plan B. Like, if this voice acting thing doesn't work out, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. And I went to VO Atlanta, and Kay Bess was the keynote, and the title of her keynote speech was Trust and Be Brave.
Be brave.
Right?
Yeah.
And that thought, those 4 words, got me through that 6 months to a year where I didn't know if I was going to ride this thing all the way to the scene of the crash or not. And so Kay's, been a huge inspiration to me. Brad Highland, when I lost that client, I called Brad that day, and he not only talked me off the bridge really, but he calmed me down. He gave me some tactics to put into place. And then, being Brad Highland, he sent me a gift card for dinner for me and my son. Oh. It's just who he is. And I never forgot that. And Pat Kirchner and Uncle Roy, and there are literally hundreds of people that have helped me. Hundreds. I go to a conference or I go to Uncle Roy's barbecue and I look around the room, I go, holy mackerel, man, you've got hundreds of friends that you didn't have a decade ago. Right?
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that wonderful?
It's been this, when I talk about this career choice, if we want to put it that way, being life-changing for me, that's what I'm talking about. Like, my life is richer because of this choice I made to become part of these lunatics, right?
Who sit in padded rooms and basically talk to themselves all day long.
The kindest, most generous, supportive, loving people I've ever come across in my life.
Yes, they are. And I've mentioned it before on this podcast when I lived in LA, and this is certainly not bashing on camera actors, but I will say that, yes, it's still competitive in voiceover, but the kindness and generosity in this community versus when I was in LA and pounding the pavement doing on camera it's different. It's just different.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in corporate, I've been in radio, I've been on camera, I've been in the theater. And I thought theater was close. not even remotely close to voiceover.
Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And speaking of KBS and trust and be brave, I'm curious if there are certain tools or faith that help you process any of your fears or concerns that, that come up for you.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I can get a little personal here. I will tell you that I am not a religious person. I was raised Catholic, and for a myriad of reasons, I am no longer that. I'm a huge proponent of mindset and keeping one's mind sort of focused in the right place and attention on the right things. I also believe in a little bit of what I'll call woo-woo stuff, right? Like, I believe in karma. I believe that you get out what you put in. And so I always try to put stuff in. I've also, about 3 years ago, was diagnosed with chronic anxiety. And like, looking back, I now realize that I've had it my entire life and that it affected my mood and how I dealt with people my entire life. And I've been getting treatment for that for 3 years. And literally within the first couple of weeks of that treatment, it changed my life. And so I'm able to choose my responses when for most of my life, I didn't have really any gap between that sort of stimulus and response. And now just having that little gap and being able to choose an appropriate response is huge for me. So, in some ways, I've had some good fortune. In many ways, I've had good fortune. I've had a lot of people help me. I've had a lot of people forgive me, right? I don't ever pretend to be a saint. But I think, to answer your question, it's been, a lot of self-development and a lot of emphasis on self-development. I'm just trying to be better every day. Some days I fail miserably,
We all do, Paul.
Sure. It's part of being human.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it stinking up the room.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, I do my own personal inventory and go, how did I walk through my day? And was I kind? Was I loving? Was I reactive? And I so relate to everything that you just spoke to, which is, I think, it's important, and I appreciate you being vulnerable. I think it's important to talk about these things because we never know who's listening. And I'll be vulnerable for a moment. Before you and I, even having this conversation, and before I joined your VO Pro community for a little while, I was terribly intimidated by you. I just was like, here is this super successful man who has very clear and strong opinions about the business, and rightfully so. And yet in many ways, you're a teddy bear, and yet you care passionately about people being successful. So it's interesting how we need to take stock of, how are we reacting? Why are we reacting? What information are we going off of? And that's kind of what I'm looking at in dealing with my own anxiety. So I appreciate you being vulnerable for a moment and talking about that.
Of course. Happy to. I'm sorry that you were ever intimidated by me. I can tell you.
Oh, hey, that's why we're talking about this, because we're responsible for how we react.
Yeah.
We're responsible for our own stuff. And is it based on reality? How much information did I have about you? I didn't really have any information about you. So when I got to know you through really listening to your podcasts and, going beyond the sound bites and being part of the dialogue in your VO Pro community, and how gracious you are with people and your humor, et cetera, it's new information for me that I can then look back on and go, what a Nimrod, Cheryl. You had this idea of this person based on what? Right? So speaking
And we all do that too, Cheryl. We all do that.
Thank you. See, you're being gracious again, and thank you. We do all do that, but to some more, than others. And I think it's important, especially in the world we're living in right now, where everything is so divisive and so reactive. And on social media, you can cut someone down in a second without really taking a 10th beat to go, okay, what am I going to base my reaction on? And, I can control what my fingers do. There was something that came up recently that really got my goat. And instead of letting my fingers fly, I wrote to Jody and Ann and said, here's where I'm at with this. Help me process it, because I don't want to burn a bridge. And I also don't want to put anything out there that I'm going to regret. So speaking of your VO Pro community, I happen to have been privy to an email that you sent out this morning about a secret course that you've been designing that you'll be releasing within the next week. Can you tell us something about it?
Well, I can tell you this. In the course of any given week, I talk to dozens and dozens of voice actors, right? That's one of the great things about starting this whole, VO Freedom Master Plan and the VO Pro community is I get to interact with a lot of us every single week. And so because of that, I think I get to see patterns occasionally. And one of the patterns that I've seen for a very long time has been, and this started, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who ended up becoming a VO Freedom Master Plan student who was ex-military. He had been in the military for 25 years, had retired.
Oh, wow.
And had gone into voiceover. And where he was struggling was he had some retirement income coming in, so he was able to spend the lion's share of his time on getting his voiceover career off the ground. So even though he was newer, he was putting a lot of time and effort into it, right? But the one area where he was struggling was in making his own schedule, being disciplined with his time. Now, you would think on first blush, well, my God, the ex-military, those folks are the most disciplined people on the planet, right? But here's the thing. And I thought the same thing. And he said to me, dude, the military has provided me a schedule every day of my life for the last 25 years. I've never had to make that schedule. Right. So, and I think it's true in some ways for corporate people. When you now have 40 more or 50 more or 60 more hours a week that you have dominion over, right? That you can decide how you spend that time, you now have to develop the skills to be able to spend that time well, right? To be able to spend it, to prioritize it, to be able to spend it on the things that are going to move the needle, the things that are going to make your life better, the things that are going to make your business better. And most people don't have those skills. And so that's what I'm working on, is to try and help people through and we all as freelancers, we all deal with it, right? Nobody is your boss. You are the boss, and that means you get to decide how you spend your time, what you spend it on, and the outcomes that investment produces. And I've said this for years. As a freelancer, as a voice actor, time and secondarily, 1 and 1A, time and attention are your two most valuable assets. How you spend those makes all the difference. It ain't the microphone. It ain't the pay to play. It's you. Your biggest limitation is you and how you spend your time and attention. So that's what
you are preaching to the soloist. I'll just say that. I can't even believe this hour has flown. I have 3 more questions, so I want to get them in.
Fire away.
Because we could go on. I'm really enjoying you being here with me. Thank you so much.
I'm having a ball, so thank you.
You're welcome. I know that your son, Robbie, and I imagine your beautiful husky, whose name I'm forgetting.
Is Gus.
Gus.
Yes.
Go to Paul's Instagram site and look at his beautiful fur baby.
He's a good-looking boy, but don't let him hear you, though, because it goes...
Is he a talker, by the way?
He is not. And the funny part about that, Cheryl, is, I went and I adopted this dog from the SPCA here, and I brought him home. And of course, I had to take a picture for Instagram because he's a beautiful boy. And I started getting these frantic communications from friends going, dude, what did you do? I'm like, what are you talking about? I adopted a dog. They're like, they start sending me all these memes of these talking huskies. I had no clue.
Actually, it just dawned on me. Right, because you do voice work, and if you had a husky that was a talker, oh my gosh.
I'm like, dear God, what have I done? And honestly, he went the first 3 weeks and never made a sound. He is not a talker. He is very expressive, but most of that expression is through, is just through his enthusiasm and his energy. He's not even 2 years old yet. So thank God he's not a talker.
So I imagine both Robbie and Gus bring you joy, and I'm wondering if you can share what else brings you joy.
Wow. Helping people,
That's evident.
I get great joy just from my daily, honestly, Cheryl, my job is I work with my friends, right? Friends in the VO Pro community, friends in the voiceover community at large, clients who have become friends. Like, I enjoy the people that I get to interact with, and even if it's virtual, spend time with every day. It's a blast. I also get time to myself, right? Because God knows the nature of what we do is pretty solitary. So for me, it's a nice balance that works. I love helping people. I love people, watching people who are members of the community or members of the master plan, watching them have victories. We have a thing in the VO Pro community called Friday Wins. That's my favorite day of the week. It's not because the weekend's coming. It's because I get to hear what has come home to roost for everybody in the course of a week. And sometimes it's tiny and sometimes it's huge. Most of the time it's in the middle, and it's all fun because I'm watching these people grow, and it's just the greatest thing in the world. So that brings me joy. Taking care of myself. I'm 57 years old, right? Getting in the gym and doing things that I know.
You don't look it, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
I
got a great mortician. Doing things that I know are good for me because I want to be around and strong enough to pick up my grandson when I'm 85. You know what I mean? That's what I'm training for. So, getting a little bit better every week in the gym. Taking Gus for a walk every morning. We have a great park near here, and we go for 3 miles or so every morning, and that brings me joy.
Love it.
Throwing a ball down the stairs and watching him lose his mind.
Isn't that amazing? If only we found such joy in
my God.
Things like that.
Yeah. And I want to clarify, that's for Gus. That's not for my son, Robbie.
For your son.
Yeah. He's a little old to chase the ball down the stairs anymore. But watching my son, he went out earlier in the week and got himself, because he wanted to, he scared himself up a job selling for a roofing company for the summer. He loves sales. He loves door knocking. He likes that it's difficult. I mean, he's got a little sales dog in him, and he's great with people, and I don't mean to trash his generation, but they're digital natives, right?
I was going to say that's remarkable for someone his age. Yeah. It really is.
They often struggle with, interpersonal live interaction. He does not. He's as gregarious and as glib as anybody you've ever met. So watching him become who he is, that sounds kind of stupid, but watching him grow into himself is that's what brings me joy.
Well, he hasn't fallen far from the tree, it sounds like it. So there's a question I like to ask all of my guests before we say goodbye. And that is, if there was a soundtrack to your life, what would be on it and why?
Oh, man. That's a tough question because my mind wants to default to the music that I love the most, but I don't know if it's the soundtrack to my life, right?
It could be your life now. It doesn't have to be like your entire, from inception. It could just be now.
Yeah, there was a time, like when I was starting the full-time VO business, I told you at one point I was just petrified, right? Like the whole thing was going to fall apart. And there was a line from Springsteen's Thunder Road that kept reverberating for like that whole year, which was, so you're scared and you're thinking we ain't that young anymore, right? That was my life for a year. Like, I didn't know if I was going to be able to pull this off. Like, I was changing careers approaching 50. And that was a scary thing. So that's definitely the soundtrack of that part of my life. Bobby McFerrin, Don't Worry, Be Happy. That's got to be on there somewhere, right? Because that's been a struggle for me. I guess partly because of the anxiety, but worry comes very naturally to me, and I'm getting better at that as I get older. Maybe the medication helps.
You know what? If that's what's working, then you keep at it.
Yeah. So, I think those two. I think maybe. Good Lord. I'd have to give that some more thought. But those two jump to mind.
I will have all of your info in the show notes, but I'm curious if there's anything else you would like to say or mention that I haven't asked you about.
Well, I just, I don't know how much of your audience turns out to be voice actors like you and I, but I'll extend this to anybody. If anything you have heard in this podcast or have heard me say in other podcasts, maybe my own, maybe somebody else's, here's my deal. If I can help you in any way, please reach out. I don't know what that might be, and I probably won't know the answer, but if it has to do with voice acting, I certainly know somebody who does. If it has to do with golf, I probably don't know the answer. I think we've established that.
If you want a golf suckist, give Paul a call.
Yeah, I can't even get the hats right. So, but I try to be as helpful as I possibly can because the kindness and the generosity that has been shown to me, largely from the voiceover community, but by so many other people in my life, like, my chosen brothers on this planet, my family, everybody else. Like, I just am in a place where if I can help you, that's what brings me joy.
Beautiful. I think that is a perfect place to end our conversation, our time together. And Paul Schmidt, I want to thank you for joining me and sharing your story and your heart with me and my listeners.
Well,
I
before
really
before we
appreciate it.
get out of here, I want to compliment you, Cheryl, because it took a little bit to get this conversation arranged, but my God, you're right. The hour has flown by, and the thoughtfulness of your questions and of your comments while we've been chatting is like it's literally unparalleled. You really put a lot of thought into our chat, and I really deeply appreciate it because that's what's allowed me to be able to open up and say whatever I've said. So I really appreciate it.
Well, you're most welcome, and I thank you in return. So it's a mutual respect and admiration for all that you're doing, and what you just offered to our listeners is such a beautiful thing and exemplary of who you are, Paul.
Well,
So,
and one of these days we're actually going to be in the same room together, and you're going to get
oh
the biggest
my
hug you've ever gotten
gosh.
in your life.
Right back at you, sir. Right back at you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Here's a little song I wrote. You might want to sing it note for note. Don't worry. Be happy. In every life we have some trouble. But when you worry, you make it double. Don't worry. Be happy. Don't worry. Be happy now.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd also like to thank the following news outlets for the use of their clips: BBC, PBS, Now This, UNESCO, and Some Good News. Theme music used with permission by Joel and Luke Smallbone, otherwise known as the group for King and Country. If you'd like to offer feedback or a story idea, email me at 19stories@soundsatchelstudios.com, via my website at cherylhalling.com, or follow me on Instagram at cherylhallingvo. I look forward to sharing more stories on the next episode of 19 Stories from Fear to Hope. Until then, stay healthy and hopeful.
Together with our differences, together we are bolder, braver, stronger.